The impetus for this project comes from a chapter in the Old Testament book of Joshua. After 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, the children of Israel were to go into the land of Canaan, but at that time the Jordan River was flooding. So Joshua told the priests carrying the ark, bring that ark to the middle of the river, and that stopped the flow. So the nation could walk through the river in dry land, much like they did the Red Sea when they left Egypt. After they were through, Joshua told the leaders of each tribe to pick up a stone and bring it to the shore and place it on a pile. And then he said to them, when your children ask you, what is the meaning of these stones, you tell them it was the Ark of the Covenant that you brought into this land. Now that's what I would like to have this monument here represent to this community and those who come to view it later. The presence of God among us. On that corner that most of you pass coming in here is a big sign that indicates this part as Open Space Park, and that the dedication to Maurice's memory was held January 5, 1974. At that time, there was nothing except pasture, a swamp, and open field. Since that time, all this has been built as a part of Maurice's vision, and I doubt whether he would have envisioned what it is today. And that's the thing we want to celebrate with regard to memory of the man who had this vision to do it. It took a lot of work even to get that far. He had to go to Washington because on that sign too is a sign that there was funding from the district, the Development of Urban and Housing Development Fund, federal funding. Now, that's the Maury we want to think about. And we'll go through this ceremony in such a way that we remember that, but also the name of this plaque, which became the motto of the city, progress through cooperation. So Dale Denherter, who is now former mayor and former councilman, and was a member of the council at the time of Maurice being mayor, will give a tribute for Maurice to Paske. Thank you, Dale. You don't have to hold it that close.
Hello? Hello? Do I have to eat this at all?
Yeah.
Can you hear?
He's just recording it.
Oh, you got it there? Okay. Okay, well, thank you for coming. We're here today to pay tribute to a very special person in the history of Sioux Center. I'd like to start now thanking Willis and leaving Meaching. I was sure he was part of the deal to get this all kind of together. So thank you for that. This is an even more special today because of family members who are present, who are represent two generations of family members. And it's Derek and Brad, and then Derek, is your Daniel and Julie? No. Whatever their names are. So thank you. My term on council overlapped with Maury's last 7 years of a 35. I read there, and people evidently take information from what speakers like me say, and they're wrong. So they talk about 35 and 34 years. So I don't know if it's 35 or 34. Maybe a family member knows what it actually is. Maury died Maury died early at 61 years of age. After being mayor for 34 years, 35 or 35, whatever it was, straight years, he died 46 years ago. We still talk about him today because he was iconic, and that's why his name continues to be part of the conversation. He was a promoter, and one of the ways that he was big on his list was that he always wanted to have the Reformed Church General Synod come to Sioux Center. That was a big thing for him. And his big dream came true, because I didn't know about that, except that I found this paper, and I was looking for stuff, and it talks about the event. This is the event that he wanted to have come. And so his big dream came true, according to what I was reading, that would happen. And there you see him. He was a very devoted Christian person. And so that's why that priority was there. So he had lots of good qualities, not only as far as his commitment to this community, but also to his church. And so today we celebrate, both those items.
Anyway, thank you, Dale. He and I were both on that council at the time of the picture here, and I think this is a picture of when Maury was last sworn in. And I think you sent it? Yes. But anyway, there's a picture here, and Guy, you look different at that time, Dale.
I am different.
But anyway, the other thing that Maury was so fervent with is helping this community do what they could for themselves. And one of those was, early on, this community decided to have its own municipal utilities. One of the big ones in that whole effort was the electrical utility, which in the long term funded a lot of the projects within this community. He, and I have the books here that tell that story. They're called They Said We Couldn't Do It. That's version 1, volume 1. And then, But We Did It Anyway. And that is more than nearly 50 years ago. It resulted in, through contacts with Washington, Des Moines, on for years, as those books describe, building a power plant in Wheatland, Wyoming. Also, it became the formation of what today is Missouri River Energy Services, which is another tie or die kind of program with utilities around the country here. And Joni Livingston from Missouri River Energy Services will talk about that more.
Thank you, Willis. As Willis said, I'm Joni Livingston, and I'm the Vice President of Communications and Member Services for Missouri River Energy Services in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Missouri River is the supplemental power supplier to Sioux Center, and for 57 years we've provided power supply and energy services to what is now 61 member municipal utilities. Well, and all good ideas start somewhere. The idea for what became Missouri River Energy Services started with the then Mayor, Maurice, Paske, and its utilities superintendent, Ari Vereps. Maury had pushed for the establishment of Sioux Center's municipal electric system, just as Willis said. And then in the early 1950s, he and Ari began going out to neighboring communities throughout Iowa to talk about getting their fair share of hydroelectric power from the dams on the Missouri River. At this time, the idea wasn't very popular, and that was because hydropower was actually more expensive than running their own small local generators. And by the way, hydropower, due to his foresight, is some of the cheapest power in the United States today. Now, Maury knew the long-term survival of municipal ownership of electric utilities really depended on working together and on having the dependable and plentiful supply of power that the federal dams could provide. Maury was a public servant and a tireless worker. 16-hour days were common, as well as quickly arranged early morning meetings with the city council in the basement of his law office. He would cook breakfast for the council members while they discussed important issues. He was persistent in his convictions, and he eventually convinced his neighboring Iowa communities, and they were successful in getting allocations of hydropower from what is now Western Area Power Administration. In a sense, Sioux Center was already a microcosm of joint action where individuals worked together for the good of all, the common good. Maury was a tireless crusader for municipal utilities working together to provide affordable and reliable electricity to their consumers and their community. Sioux Center kept growing, as well as all of Northwest Iowa, and Maury soon realized that the Iowa communities would need a supplemental source of electricity when their hydro allocations were maxed out. And that's when Maury led the effort to officially form what is today Missouri River Energy Services. Maury served on the board of directors for Missouri River from 1965 through 1975, and by the time he left the board, the organization had 63 members in the states of Iowa, Minnesota, and South Dakota, and then more members joined a little later from North Dakota. Maury's strong leadership, his willingness to take on any difficult challenge, his spirit and faith, and his deep belief in what can be accomplished when those with common interests work together, all of these are still at the heart of what Missouri River Energy is today. Missouri River created the Maurice Paske Public Official Award, which is our highest honor, and we present it each year to a public servant whose distinguished service in support of public power is true to the Paske spirit. We're grateful for Maurice Paske's foresight, dedication, tenacity, and passion for the power of working together for the good of the community and the good of others. So with that, I have the honor of presenting Mayor Kraling with a copy of the plaque.
By the way, Missouri River Energy Services also helped fund this project, so we appreciate that too.
Absolutely. So Mayor Kraling, here's a copy of the plaque, and it's up to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joni. Good morning, everyone. First, a quick word of thanks to Willis Elbra for spearheading this. Our parks have a lot of natural beauty. That natural beauty is made even better by the work of Lee and his crew, and it is enhanced even further by installations such as this one that can help us remember and inspire us. I never had the chance to meet or work with Maurice Paske, but I do have a deep appreciation for one of his greatest gifts to our community, one of his legacies, and that is the gift of shared use facilities. The theater that bears his name, he and Vera's name, Paske Theater, and the facilities over to my right are all tangible results of a commitment to cooperation, to working together, to progress through cooperation. And while those facilities are the clear, direct result of Maurice's leadership, I believe the greater legacy is a philosophy, an attitude, a way of thinking about how to build community. And so I celebrate that legacy of Maurice Paske that goes beyond buildings and facilities and is that mindset of progress through cooperation. So on a personal note, I did not get to know Maury. I did, however, have the opportunity, the honor, and the privilege of working a lot with Vera. When I first moved to Sioux Center in 1984, I was invited to join Center Stage, the local community theater troupe. And the board of Center Stage met in Vera's home on 4th Avenue. And we met to select plays, we met to choose directors, to find production staff, manage the patron list, and secure volunteers. It was an important lesson for me as a young man to learn how things got done in Sioux Center. You think big, you ask boldly, you lead by example, and you work together. And I learned that from Vera, not from Maury. We are a stronger and more vibrant community because Maury and Vera walked among us. I hope that for many, this installation can inspire us to continue living in that legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Krigling. You notice that this sculpture has 3 legs, and they're perfectly lined up. I know the architect designed it that way. But anyway, they represent then the cooperation among the schools, the community, and the college. And Maury had much to do with Dordt College, now University, locating in this community. That was not always easy, even for him, because right next door in Orange City is the college of his church. And during that time, those early periods when we first came to Sioux Center, there wasn't the kindest relationship between those of the Christian Reformed and those of the Reformed. Every once in a while I run into that kind of reference. They call us, we are either Reformers or Christians. And that meant something then. But on the other hand, that was overcome by the progress through cooperation. And Mr. Harold Wilson of Dordt University, now Director of Operations, will give a response.
Thank you, Willis. Thanks for inviting us today. It's a privilege to speak to you today on behalf of Dordt University at this auspicious occasion. I've spoken to some of our older faculty and emeriti administrators to learn more about Maurice to Paske, the Joint Use Committee, and the spirit of cooperation that exists in this community. Dordt's founder, B.J. Hahn, and Maury worked very well together as college president and mayor. They were good friends and saw each other often. The college began on the site of a mink farm across the street from Maury's house. Hopefully the college smelled better than the mink farm. Maury was a Northwestern College trustee and supporter, but wanted Dordt to prosper as well as part of his community. And we continue to have positive relationships with our sister institution over in Orange City. But our goal is to see our home community of Sioux Center become a better and better place to live and work, and to be an asset that keeps our community growing bright. Dordt has greatly benefited from this partnership over the years as the track and the football stadium were built. The construction of the Paske Theater right across the street here provided a center for the performing arts for Dordt, for the school district, and the community, and continues to serve that way. The relationship continues to benefit all the parties as the All-Season Center and now the American State Bank Sports Center have been developed. And this partnership has enabled Dordt University to provide great facilities for its students while providing assets to the other partners as well. And it's helped us to become the top-rated institution in the country for student engagement for the past 6 years because of the facilities that we can provide. We have another direct connection with Maury as we now own his former home on 4th Avenue Northeast. Well over 100 years old, it is still sound and has provided a home for faculty, families, and even served briefly as our COVID ward for students. This morning I was reading Maurice's obituary online, and there's a picture of some of you, of his three children, and he and his wife sitting in front of the marble fireplace that is still in the living room of the house. I've served 5 different educational institutions in 5 different municipal settings in my career, and the partnership here with the city and the school district is unique amongst those. In other relationships, situations, the relationship between town and gown can be tense, and civic administrations are less than supportive, sometimes suspicious, and even restrictive to their college. But here in Sioux Center, the city's first question is often, what can we do to help? This positive attitude is part of the fabric of our community and is the legacy of Maurice to Paske. And Dordt University is grateful for this relationship and glad to celebrate the dedication of this sculpture in his memory today.
Thank you. I had asked Gary McEldowney if he would participate in this program in response to the schools. He was called away due to a funeral, so unless there's someone else who might represent the school system, I think I could do that pretty well, because it was the Rec and Arts Council was formed as the first community organization representing the college, the schools, and the community, and were, I would call, the glue of joint use or progress through cooperation. In that, I want to give credit to one of the people on that committee who was then superintendent of the schools. That would be Chuck Irwin, who brought together the 2 school systems here that I mentioned earlier were a little contentious with one another. And I would say from then on, those school systems learned how to work together. And there are a number of different stories we could tell about how they've cooperated over the years. One of the first projects on this site was to build an indoor swimming pool. That wasn't really Maurice's interest. He was really careful about talking about recreation. He would prefer to use discretionary time, because no time was leisure time or recreation for Maurice. The first combined unit, or unit that showed the cooperation with city, school, and college, was, as was mentioned by David, the Paske Theater. And also a second one between the community and Dordt College was when they built the rec center and provided a place initially for the gymnastics program. As well as you might well imagine, it wasn't that easy to have the college think about how members of the community might use the rec center for some recreation, but also for exercising. I can remember some of the problems I had with the staff members who said, well, wait a minute, first this is college. No, I said, not really. But they learned, and really it's going well now. So there have been many other occasions and events that both city and college combined, and one of them is the Early Learning Center that is located right across from the middle school right up this way. So if a representative from the school were here, they could talk about many more. As I said, the Rec and Arts Council was formed by Maurice, but it began as an arts committee because, as was already mentioned, Maurice's favorite art was theater. Even though he and Reverend Hahn had contention over closing a movie theater, several years before, they were open to building this Paske Theater as part of a way to vote for the bond issue that was approved after the first failure by a number of college people getting involved in the combination of school, community, and college, building a theater in what was then the high school. It worked. It's still going today. The arts director, Caitlin Baileju, will present now the role of art within a community.
Thank you all for coming out this morning to support another installment of fine art here in Sioux Center. This is the second sculpture that I've had the honor of being at the dedication ceremony for since I started as a Sioux Center arts director. And there are a lot of reasons why public art, such as this, is beautiful, such as this beautiful symbol of Paske, matters to our community. For one thing, it elicits a uniqueness to our city, a thing that stands out as something that is individually ours. It establishes Open Space Park as a landmark and a destination. It beautifies this town, presenting a treat to the eyes of any passerby. It causes us to slow down in our busy lives, take a moment, and appreciate and ponder the values of our community through this sculpture. And one of the best things about public art is that it is freely accessible to all, bridging that gap. And beyond just the physical benefits of erecting a sculpture like this, it provides an intersection between past, present, and future. This memorial sculpture is meant to be a tool or remembrance for Maurice Paske today and in the future. May little ones walk by this sculpture and wonder of its meaning, and may we keep the legacy of Paske alive by establishing reminders such as this. Thank you.
Now I have asked that the family, Derek and Jonas, if you will, to introduce the family and say a few words as well. You may decide to do it differently than that. Okay?
Yeah, thank you, Willis. Hi, I'm Derek Paske. I left Iowa about 50 years ago, and I last been to Sioux Center in the last millennium in 1999. I looked up the Wikipedia pages about Sioux Center, and things have grown. It was when I was 15, it was 2,000 people. When I was last year, it was about 6,000 people. Now it's about 8,000 people, and a lot of this is new. I think really it's just the end of Fourth Avenue or something. But here we are. So, but very quickly about my father. My father was a wonderful guy. I mean, he was a very complicated man. He was very driven in his way. I mean, he worked too hard. He died too young. By now, I'm a lot older than he would have been or was, and I would have said, Maury, cut it out. You're a kid, slow down and take better care of yourself. But he was a master at getting people to work together, and that sense of cooperation is something that I carry with me, as much as I carry with me the memory of the big sky. I mean, my daughter and I flew in last night to Sioux Falls, and stepping outside, it was just breathtakingly beautiful to see 180 degrees of sky, in the early evening. So Maury and Dad I interviewed him in 1974 for a project I was working on, and I asked him, I said, have things sort of set in motion, or when you're gone? And he said, oh, it's so firmly set, if I drop dead tomorrow, nobody'd notice the difference. He did last for 2 more years, but then died still very much too young. But I'm also very, very glad to have Vera brought into the picture. I mean, in many respects, I think of my mom as a sort of proto-feminist. I mean, she was a very powerful person in her own right and lived on for 15 years or so in her wheelchair. Very much a fan of Sioux Center. And she used to drive around in her chariot with posters promoting the plays and that kind of stuff. So, anyway, it's really great to have her honored as well as my dad. So I'm really glad to be back. I've never gotten over having lived here, even though I left a long, long time ago. And I'd like to introduce also the other people here. My older sister, Maureen, has not able to be here because she and her husband are having some health issues or something. Their son Ryan is over there, and his wife Melinda. the only Iowan, the only Midwesterner among the crowd that's flown in here. Anyway. Anyway, but also my brother Brad is here. He may want to say a couple of words, and let's see who else. And Jonas, my nephew, also from Virginia. I guess it's Virginia by now. Yeah. From the East Coast. We're the East Coast, East and West Coast elites. We all came in for this. But anyway, so Brad is here, Jonas is here, and his wife Elise over there in the back, and it's really. I had taken to thinking that I don't know if I'd ever get back to Sioux Center, but this seemed like a good occasion to finally do it. So it's quite a place to recall and remember, as we did and as I do. So, my brother Jonas, you were on the program. You want to say a few words, and then our Brad, maybe the other son. So I'll turn it over to him, and he can defer to his son Jonas if he wishes. Anyway, thanks so much for being here.
I was surprised to experience yesterday morning I need to fill up with gas. So I went to co-op naturally, and I was helped by a guy who I started talking with. His name was Marv. And I said, "What's your last name, Marv?" And he said, "Hoyer." And out popped from me, to my surprise, "Oh, Christian Reformed, huh?" And I said, "Did you go to Christian school here?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, you know one of my best friends, A.J. Borsma." "Oh, yeah, I got any number of whoopings from that guy." Okay. And anyhow, that just came out of me. I remember how fascinating it was to hear about Sioux Center and what was on the drawing board from backstage. And I do remember when you, Dr. Alberta, were being mentioned around the household as a really good candidate. Is that right? Yeah. So I thought that would be an interesting thing to share. But I do appreciate the kind things said also about my mother. My father put up with my spending my education as an artist. And my mother was the one who taught me about art as a kid, looking at old pictures of Vincent van Gogh and Ruysdael and Van Eyck, et cetera, names that always, my art history courses always rang a bell with some of the names in Sioux Center and Sioux County that I came up with. But anyhow, the main image that came to my mind in thinking about saying just a few words to you was a photograph, actually a pair of photographs. There was one that I have framed at home that Maury never expected anybody to see. And he obviously hired a professional photographer to take it for him. And that was him praying at the grave of Dr. Martin Luther King in Atlanta, Georgia. And I think that image represents how his veneration of Martin Luther King as a warrior of love was really akin to his own devotion to people and public welfare. The other image that came to mind was a picture that I took myself. Maury and Bernie Mao had Reverend Bernard Hahn, excuse me. I'm getting mixed up with an old neighborhood kid. I knew of their cooperation, and I always knew about the tension between Christian Reformed and the Reformed Church. And for years, as Dad and Reverend Hahn's friendship grew, he always said that someday that they should go to the Holy Land together. And he'd treat if Dr. Reverend Hahn would consider it. Well, anyhow, once upon a time, late in their lives, I took this picture of none other than Reverend Bernard Hahn and Maurice H. Paske sitting beside each other on a small tour boat on the Sea of Galilee. And I thought that I appreciated the Old Testament reference here this morning. But I just thought that really is a nice image for the spirit of cooperation between those two guys and how they tried to make that really a part of this community. And I was married to Norma Rulofs for a number of years. She's the mother of Marcus and Jonah. And she said, said to me how coincidental, or what a part I may have played, maybe an underestimated one, in becoming a friend of A.J. Boersma when I was 14. Him being the principal of the Christian school at that time. I was playing baseball just because of peer pressure on a Sunday afternoon behind Dordt College. And that was a little edgy, you know, to be out playing on Dort's lawn and be having fun on Sunday afternoon. The guys were there. I was thinking, when am I going to be out in right field again? And Boersma drove up. And he was had a reputation of being a stern schoolmaster, so the guys went, whoa. And he said, hey, Paske, come here once, I want to talk to you. And so he said, Ostra and me, Larry Ostra, my neighbor, we're going out to hang a few bluebird boxes out along the Rock River. Would you like to come along? And I looked at the team, and I looked at him, and I said, I gotta go. And so Boersma was my best friend and mentor, my bird guru throughout my life. I last saw him when he was 96. And he comes to mind too as a wonderful part of this town, and also what our friendship might have contributed to the softening of relationships between the two denominations. Okay.
Thank you. I should mention too that Roger Evans was a longtime chairman of the Recreation and Arts Committee and retired from that at the time they left here when he retired from his service. And that, as I said, that committee was sort of the key to the whole development of this facility, which has now been taken over and managed by the Joint Use Committee. But they were the key to its development. Unfortunately, I have been married to an artist for about 60 years now, a little over that. She belongs to what is called the Artisans Road Trip. It's a group of artists that get together and have shows and do things together. Mainly most are from the Lakes area, but because of her and my need to go along with her to help her with the various shows and things like that, I met Bill Lieb, who is the sculptor of this monument, and he has a few words to say about how that came about and what his thoughts were in the design and implementation of it.
Thank you, Willis. As we've heard over and over this morning, progress through cooperation was the foundation of Maurice Paske's successful leadership in the community. As an artist and an architect, my goal for this project was to create a memorial sculpture that would illustrate in 3 dimensions this concept of progress through cooperation. Let me explain how we tried to achieve this goal. The base of the sculpture is composed of 3 upward-reaching pylons. They are made of corten steel, which is a weathering steel requiring 3 to 4 years to complete its rusting process. One pylon represents the city of Sioux Center, another the schools of Sioux Center, and the third represents Dordt University. The 3 are cooperating together to support the top part of the sculpture, which represents progress. The top part is made of aluminum, and in contrast with its rusty base, it looks shiny and new. Progress is always about building something new. The top resembles a diamond. In our culture, that shape suggests something we value and desire, just as progress is something we value and desire. However, the shape of the top looks incomplete. The reinforcing bars are exposed, the welds are exposed.
Yeah, right.
And it looks as though some parts may be missing. Progress is always incomplete. Progress is that stage between the beginning of a project and the completion of a project. Project progress is headed toward completion. The top of the sculpture moves. It is activated by the breeze. Progress requires movement. Sometimes that means 2 steps forward and 1 backward. Sometimes progress happens in the background and it doesn't appear to be moving at all. But progress does move. And last, the top surfaces of the sculpture have a special texture that scatters the sunlight and creates a sense of celebration, like tossing confetti into the air. Progress is always a reason to celebrate. And that is what we are doing here today. So there it is, progress through cooperation. Thank you.
Oh, this is great, Joe. Thank you very much. I want to keep that one. I am thinking about this and this program, thought of another explanation, or obviously symbol, of the 3 pylons, and that would be we recognize the triune God, as well as the top movement. If it's not the wind, it's the spirit of progress through cooperation that will continue moving it. Thank you all for coming, and I think there's some coffee, goodies, and that's my prayer, that this will continue to be a blessing to those who gather here for any occasion and see what was spoken here. What is this all about? Who was this? And what for? That's what I see every time I go to a monument park. And I think those are the kind of meditations that these things should generate. Thank you all for coming.